The lengthy leaning of Parshas Naso contains the various karbanos that the Nesiim brought, each one bringing the identical karban upon the Chanukas HaMishkan. The first of the Nesiim that brought the Torah tells us was Nachshon ben Aminadav from Shevet Yehuda. And the Torah tells us, Vayhi HaMakriv Bayom HaRishon, the first one that brought on the first day, as Karbano, his karban, Nachshon ben Aminadav the Matei Yehuda, was Nachshon from the Shevet of Yehuda. Now, at first glance, there's nothing striking about that formulation. But the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh notes that it's different than what we find by the subsequent Shvatim. Why is it that it doesn't say that he was the Nasi? These are the Nesiim that are bringing it, and every other karban, the person is told, the Torah tells us about the person that he was the Nasi in charge of the Shevet, and yet it doesn't say it by Nachshon ben Aminadav. Why is that? Says the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh, V'lo amar Nasi, kechol ha'amor b'chol matlos. It doesn't say Nasi when it comes to Nachshon ben Aminadav as it does by every other Shevet. Lomar, teaching, ki roi hu Nachshon l'hakriv harishon hagam shelo hayanasi. And Nachshon, the greatness of Nachshon was that even were he not the Nasi, he would still be fit to bring one of these karbanos. Uma'alaso mitzad atzmo. And his greatness came from within himself and what he had achieved. And not just because of the position Mashin gain, b'chol shar hanesim. But when it comes to the other Nesim, they brought because of their role, because of their leadership role in the Shevet, but not because of something they had achieved on their own. Where did that greatness of Nachshon come from? So it continues the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh. Od yirtzeh lahaflik mahuso. This also reflects the greatness of the nature of Nachshon. Shelo haya machshev atzmo k'nasi, ela ke'echad mibnei hashevet. That even when he was the Nasi, he didn't view himself as being so special. He didn't view himself as being above anybody else. He viewed himself as being part and parcel of the Shevet. And maybe that's part of the Maila that he refers to in his first explanation. The greatness of Nachshon, for which he deserved, even if he wasn't a Nasi, was because he understood. He had this midah of anava, of the fact that he was in a position of greatness, but he didn't let it get to his head. He understood that he was gifted, that he had worked on himself, and he was managed to attain. And because of that, he tried to channel it towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I was thinking about this week in light of the Petirah of one of the Gedolei Hador of Gershon, Edelstein, Zatzal. It's very interesting. He was from the elders, the head of the Moeses Gedolei HaTorah in Eretz Yisrael, but he didn't have the same shame from the perspective that I have in Chutz La'aretz as the Gedolim that preceded him, Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Rav Steinman, and others. Didn't have he wasn't known in the same way. I personally had the zechus of meeting Rav Steinman, of meeting Rav Chaim, never meeting Rav Gershon Edelstein. And where does that come from? So I think after having read many stories recently, not just this week, but before and also about Rav Gershon, is part of, and this came across in the Hespedim as well, and it's something that's worth appreciating, is part of his greatness. And maybe why it wasn't known as much was because of his tremendous anava, because of how humble he was. Just two stories that maybe reflect this perspective. Story was told that soon after he became Rosh Yeshiva in Panovich, a younger of the Rosh Yeshiva, there was a young man who came, who didn't know how to get to the yeshiva, and he had arrived in Bnei Brak, and he had two heavy suitcases, and he saw this chashava-looking person, but there are many Baruch Hashem chashava-looking people in Eretz Yisrael. And he asked Rav Gershon, not knowing who he was, how do you get to the Panovich Yeshiva? And Rav Gershon told him, I'm on my way. I'm going to the yeshiva right now. I happen to be that I work there. He said, let me help you with the suitcases. And he carried one of the heavy suitcases. The young man carried the other, and they walked together to the yeshiva. The next day, when Rav Gershon got up to give Shir Klali, the young man was in for a surprise when he realized that's the Rosh Yeshiva. He didn't hold himself out to be a Rosh Yeshiva. People flocked to him because of his greatness. But like Nachshon, lo yamachshiv atzmo k'nasi. It wasn't about who he was. And it was with that midah that he was able to relate and had a tremendous sense of chesed for other people, opening up his home to people, a young man who had nowhere to eat and nowhere to stay. He used to come in the mornings. He needed somebody to talk to, and he would make him breakfast. He would fry an omelet for him. He was somebody who just had a sensitivity to other people. It's also told that he had a known practice amongst his family that it took him a while to come home from shul on Shabbos and Yontif. And nobody knew why that was. They assumed he was learning somewhere, but they could never find where he was learning, who he was teaching, what was going on. And one young man decided to follow him. And notice that he had a route that he took, that he went to specific apartments, knocked on the doors. He would walk in, he would say, Good Shabbos, Good Yantiv, stay for a minute or two, and then he would leave. These were people who were alone. Almanos, Yesomim, widows, orphans, other people who just needed a smile, needed a good Shabbos, needed a good Yantiv. And Gershon didn't say, oh, that's somebody else's. He said, okay, what's the difference? Me, somebody else, it's going to lift him up. Lo haya machshav atzmo kanasi. And that's part of what we lost. We also lost, he was 100 years old, a link to the previous Doros. That's hard to replicate. But understanding that we had people like this hopefully gives us a little bit of chizuk to work on our midos, to understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us talents, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us gifts, but they are to use to give to other people, not to hold ourselves up above other people, not to be machshiv atzmeinu, not to hold ourselves as better than anybody else because of what we may have achieved, but rather to use those kochos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, like Rav Gershon did, like Nachshon ben Aminadov did, in order to uplift, in order to help other people, and ultimately come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.